Welcome back, everyone. Sheepdog Smokey here, and this one's a bit different than my normal stuff, but I couldn't ignore this one. We have New Mexican Senator and U.S. Marine John Pinto has passed away at the age of 94. Um, Pinto was a code talker. Now, this is something that I know I was taught in both high school history and collegiate level military history. Can't really say how much it's taught in either of those places now, as I'm not able to get a job teaching. But you see, the code talkers were instrumental in our Pacific Theater War of World War II. What we knew is that our codes, just as the codes being used by our enemies, were very susceptible because they're all very similar. If you have any inclination to look at code, there are several variants where people will use numbers to replace letters, 1 through 26. Sometimes they'll have a deviation to where maybe A is 10, and then the last 10 letters are 1 through 10. You see, those are easy to figure out. Just like it's easy to figure out where you replace letters with other letters. Basically, you write the alphabet backwards and use those, or anything like it. But the one thing they couldn't break were the code talkers, because you see, it included two elements. One, it was a code. It was not simply the Navajo language. It was, however, a code in the Navajo language. And now all of the original 29 code talkers who invented the code have sadly passed away, but there were more than 400 that learned the code. Uh, New Mexican Senator Pinto among them. And they would relay these codes via telephone or radio, and it was instrumental in the war. And it was, honestly, it was brilliant. This is something that had never been done before. Imagine in ancient times, had Sparta, when they were trying to send messages back, written those messages in the same code they were going to use, but in Latin, not in the language they spoke. Perseus, in the second battle, had written his in Roman instead of Greek. Or say you had someone like Mark Antony, serving under Caesar, fighting in Gaul, but instead of using his native tongue to form the code, had used Egyptian. And he had someone who spoke Egyptian and could recognize the code. The code talkers basically realized, if we can expand the base of this code, it will make it exponentially harder to break, and no one ever did. Not until the mid 60s, when it was finally declassified, did anyone but the 400 or so people who spoke it know what it meant. It's brilliant, it honestly is. After serving in World War II, Senator Pinto had become a teacher, and then ultimately in 1977, ironically the year I was born, was elected to the New Mexico State Senate, where he served for 50 years, almost, well, 40 years roughly. And he was the oldest member of the Senate. And everything that I've read in this story, he was a true servant of the people. And I've met several Native Americans. I went to school with a few of them in high school. By and large, they're all that way. And sadly, it's an attitude that was very prevalent when I was a child. And granted, I grew up in a very small town compared to cities today. Imagine it as Kennesaw, Georgia versus Chicago. So I grew up in a town that was very similar to what my Native American schoolmates in high school described as when they're around their extended family. If we heard someone had broken their leg, people just started mowing yards and fixing things for them. We'd show up with dinner. We'd show up and help do anything and everything we could for them. I remember even doing this in high school, where we would learn of someone, one of our teachers' husbands, or one of our teachers was physically unable to do something, we would just show up and do it. There was a story, I don't know how much I believe of it, but there was a story of one of the teachers, and this gentleman was getting on in years, and his car was in desperate need of a lot of maintenance. So his wife got his keys, had it towed to the school, and the shop class did all the work. And they chipped in, bought the parts, basically rebuilt his engine, and he didn't even know about it. He was using her car. She didn't work. He didn't ever apparently go into his own garage. Like I said, I don't know how much I believe of it, but I want to, so I'm going to. And that's the kind of thing, the example of Senator Pinto, the example of small town America from 30 years ago. It's the same kind of things we need today. And we could learn so much by simply looking at the World War II generation and how they lived and emulating those things. I'm not saying that we need to scrap the world as we have it. I wouldn't want to give up my Switch or my iPad or the computer I'm working on now. But the less time we spend on those things, the more time we spend with each other, the richer our lives are. I go out and I just sit outside and talk to my neighbors and, help them with getting their car out of the mud, or, they're mowing, so I go over with a weed eater, or I'm mowing and they come over with a weed eater, and things like that. And it I love it because it lets me know, one, that the neighborhood around me and the world around me is a little bit of a nicer place, but also it lets me know that if I'm in trouble, I can count on them. Now, this leads me to another point. Pardon me. You see, coming up in just 2 days is Memorial Day. There are actually 3 armed services holidays: Armed Forces Day, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day. And there's a very simple way to think about those holidays. You see, Armed Forces Day, which was just a few weeks ago, is for those currently wearing the uniform. This is when we reflect on and we give thanks for those serving us today. Veterans Day, which will be in November, is for those who have come home, those who wore the uniform at one time but no longer do. It's when we reflect on their service and give our thanks for them. Memorial Day, which happens to fall on my 42nd birthday this year, is for those who didn't come home. Now, I know when I reflect on the meaning of Memorial Day, I give thanks for all serving today who have served, made it home or not. But that's the actual cause for Memorial Day. To tell a short story, I've done this on Twitter, I've told the story in YouTube comments, but I had 3 great uncles and a grandfather that went to World War II. My paternal grandfather was actually not drafted and told to stay home because he was working on a cattle farm. Of course, an army marches on its stomach, you gotta have beef. So he was told to stay home and work the farm. I do have a couple of great uncles who didn't go, one who was a child and another who was too young. But Roland, Raymond, Coleman, and CV being my grandfather, all went. Now, my grandfather did go AWOL just before deploying to Europe to marry my grandmother. Got back in time to deploy with his unit, and nothing happened, thankfully. And he served in Italy and came home. Raymond was in the Navy. His boat was actually hit by a Nazi torpedo that didn't detonate. I know he was very grateful for that. He actually has a small piece of the torpedo that he kept until the end of his life. Roland was a paratrooper, and we all know about the failed drop, the scattering, as they call it or they make reference to in Saving Private Ryan. And unfortunately, on 8 June of 44, he passed away. He lost his life, which is a bit almost ironic because Coleman, the one I've not told you about, was a tank commander. He had already fought Rommel in North Africa. I had a bullet in one leg from that campaign. and then deployed from England and sailed the Channel and stormed the beach in his tank. Had a bullet in the other leg from that encounter. He made it home. I was privileged enough to sit with him for a day, about 10, 11 hours almost, and just every now and then prompt with a question and listen to the story of his time. And I learned more in that day than I did in 3 years of high school history. I miss him still. He was the kind of guy that would give you the shirt off his back. He sees you stopped on the highway with your hood up. He pulls in behind you, flashes going, grabs his toolkit, walks up. Let's get this baby running again. And we're losing them daily. I don't normally talk about websites to check out or charities to donate to, but there are two. One of them I mentioned when I talked about the Coast Guard vet in Florida, Code of Vets. Gretchen does amazing things for our veterans. Check her out on Twitter, Code of Vets, CODEOFVETS. It's just the Twitter handle. Check her out there. The other, of course, is Gary Sinise. His foundation does amazing things for those still serving, and they do take our World War II veterans to the official World War II museum in Louisiana once a year for the Flights of Valor. Great programs. So if you're looking to donate to worthwhile groups, those two, I would definitely recommend them. I'm going to be slowing down the videos over this weekend because, as I said, it's Memorial Day. It's also my birthday, so I'm going to be spending time for both of those reasons with my family. I hope to have the videos back up and going by Tuesday. I may have something I just can't resist recording over the rest of the weekend, but have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Have a great Memorial Day. Make sure to pause for a moment and remember all of those who did not make it home so that we have the freedoms we do, and all of those that their service has helped. Please remember to like and comment on this video and to share it. Just keep the comments civil. If you have stories of your own about veterans in your family who either did or didn't make it home, but that you know their story, please share them. Please also remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you're among the first to know of all new content as it is posted. Until next time, everyone have a wonderful day.